Good morning, children. It is almost Christmas, which means it is almost the end of the year, which means it is time for all of us to sit back and reflect on the year behind them and what they're hoping for the year ahead. Honestly, 2018 has been really good for me reading-wise, so today I'm just going to be doing my best books of this year. Granted, not all of these have been published this year, but they are ones that I did read or just now got around to reading. So let's get to it. These are in no particular order because it was hard enough to pick like 10 favorite books of the year. To pick favorites among those favorites is just too much for my heart. So going in the order that I did read them this year, we're going to start off with one I read way earlier this year whenever I was trying to get a bit more into sci-fi and started watching more booktube channels. This was way before I started mine, but one I had been hearing people rant and rave about was The Martian by Andy Weir, which was well worth the hype. He's basically abandoned on Mars whenever his team leaves, thinking that he's dead, and he has to use what little resources they have left to be able to survive until they can make their way back to pick him up. That ends up being quite a while, so he doesn't have enough food, so he has to learn how to like grow food on Mars. It's just an excellent journey. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. This one had a lot of great comedy, a lot of great character. It was very cool and scientific whenever it came to like figuring things out. I am not a science person, but I was able to follow it very, very well still. It's primarily a funny book, but it's serious enough to where you do feel a real sense of dread for the narrator and honestly not knowing whether or not he's going to survive because each problem he faces seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's just really cool seeing his resourcefulness in there. The next two books I'm going to be talking about I don't have on hand because I lent them to people. The first book of that was called The Book of Essie by Megan McLean Weir. The Book of Essie is about a girl named Essie who grew up in a reality show environment. The reality show is called Six for Hicks, and it is about a very religious family that has way too many children, which you can kind of tell what it's going for on that. What happens at the very beginning of the book is it is discovered that Essie is pregnant, and honestly, I can't say much more than that because everything about this book is so good because it just keeps you guessing, and whenever things are revealed, it's revealed in a very real way. It also goes over another character in the book. I cannot remember her name for the life of me, but she is a reporter and she grew up in a very dangerous cult and had gotten out of it. So you get to see a lot of dynamics with religion and people using the power of religion over people to make them do horrible things. Not only that, how a lot of blaming goes on, especially with women in like some of the more old-fashioned religious communities, and there is a lot that goes on with that. This book left me breathless. It was a pillar of female empowerment and kind of just a story about getting out of these toxic environments that are trying to make you feel guilty for things that aren't your fault, for things that make you you, and for things that have happened to you that you had no control over in the first place. And honestly, I can't say much more about it without giving away any mega spoilers because anything past the first chapter is a spoiler. There are just that many twists and like revelations throughout the book. I just 100% recommend. When I read after that, that got me into one of my new favorite authors. That was Maria Simple's Where'd You Go, Bernadette? I know that one's been out for a while. I missed it during its mega hype whenever everybody was reading it and loving it. And I don't know, it was just one of those I kept seeing on the shelf but just never got until one day I just got one and then saw what all the hype was about. It is the funniest book I think I have read this year, and that's even after reading The Martian. And it is a book about anxiety, and it's about the extent that one woman is able to go to just avoid seeing people, and it is glorious. Most of the situations happening in there are just everyday like neighbor dispute things, but they get blown way out of proportion because Bernadette is very, very rich, so she gets to use her money to carry out all of these crazy endeavors to like not be around people and to avoid confrontation. So she'll go through and do all of these crazy passive-aggressive gestures to like the people in her life that she's trying to avoid because she can't just outright tell somebody whenever she's having a problem. And this is all everything I relate to. The passive aggressiveness in here is just wonderful. And it's everything I would do if I had the budget to do it. The main point of the story is Bernadette's kid gets good grades on her test scores or whatever, and she gets to choose what they do for that. She wants to go to Antarctica. She wants to go on this cruise to Antarctica, and Bernadette is realizing that she is going to be stuck on a little cruise ship with all of these people, and she is not having that. And the main plot of the book is just her trying to get out of it, and it is golden. It leads to a very interesting climax, and things get blown into massive proportions that you never saw coming. I just had a ton of fun with it. It was a very good feel-good book that displayed anxiety in a very real way. Imagine me holding a copy here. Where'd You Go, Bernadette? Maria Simple. Next is a book that I heard blowing up all over BookTube constantly, and I was kind of ignoring it because it's technically a romance. So it's one that I got into very hesitantly, but I had an option whenever I started my Book of the Month club to get another free book. And then this was one of them because it was like a book for it like a year ago or whatever. And that was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, this one was so gorgeous. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo follows a reporter who's getting a big expose from this aging actress who was really big during the 50s, 60s, who's Evelyn Hugo. She was famous for being very promiscuous, for having giant gazanga hunkas. I am not putting that in there. For being very shapely in places, if you know what I mean. And for having 7 husbands. And since no one actually knew her true story, this expose is going to be a really huge thing. But whenever it goes back, you learn that she is a bisexual woman who is trying to make her way around that while being such a huge icon in such a homophobic time period. And it is so gorgeous. You get to find out who her true love was through all of this, all of the struggles that she goes through, and all of the people that she goes through. She's not exactly a good person in a lot of her endeavors, but she is such a good character. Just about everyone in there, they're very real, they're very flawed, but still very good in their own ways. So the whole story, by the end of it, there's just such a feeling of triumph. This is one that made me cry like crazy. And it was a romance still, and it was a really good one. I definitely recommend it to anybody at all, even for people who don't like romances at all, like me. My next favorite one is another one I just lent out to someone else too, although you guys heard me rant and rant about it already. That is Cersei by Madeline Miller. And oh my gosh, such a good book. Madeline Miller has only come out with 2 books so far, Song of Achilles and then Cersei, and they all have to do with Greek mythology, but really in-depth personal dives into Greek mythology. And this one follows the witch Cersei that you do meet in the Odyssey, the one that turns everybody into pigs. The story itself starts way back. She is the daughter of a nymph and the sun god Helios. It is her life growing up, discovering that she's a witch, being exiled to her island, and the way that she copes with everything. She gets to be present for a lot of big events within Greek mythology, from Prometheus to the Minotaur to the Odyssey, you know, even going well beyond that. It's kind of about her struggle to be human in a world of gods and goddesses, where everyone is so incredibly apathetic and very blood hungry towards the humans in the world, where she was born with an astounding amount of sympathy, which shows early on whenever she helps Prometheus with something, and then carries on with her having a real love for humans and a passion to help them. Even whenever she gets screwed over again and again, she still has this wonderful compassion and determination. She is a very strong woman, incredibly strong character. Honestly, she's probably one of my favorite characters. There's something so empowering about seeing a woman just kick all of the ass whenever the world is ass. So I definitely recommend it. Beautiful all the way through. There are definitely some trigger warnings in there for stuff. If feel like I can't say too much. Good book, good book, good book. Okay, so after that, another book that made me cry my eyes out, and that is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusick. I'm not going to say much about this because I feel like I've ranted about it already, but this is basically a book about the Holocaust, and the narrator is literally death, and it is about a German girl who is trying to find her way through this war with a new family that she's in while trying to become more literate because reading's like her favorite thing. It's just an amazing historical fiction with an amazing narrator with a very interesting take on that time period. I definitely recommend it. Even the movie was pretty good too. I recommend reading than watching it, so very good. Just be warned, you are going to cry. Next favorite was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. And this one was just a beautiful book about humans. While the last book I talked about showed the ugliness of humanity, this one shows the beauty of it. It takes place in a world where most people are dead. That's a terrible way to say that's the beauty of humanity. Most of the human population is taken out very quickly by a spreading disease that kills just about everyone. I think there's like 10% of the population left, maybe even less than that. And it takes place like 20 years after everything has happened, and it follows a group of Shakespeare performers that will go around in their caravan and perform Shakespeare to all of the survivors and the little colonies that they have made. There is a lot of really good things in here. It switches perspectives a lot, and it goes to before, during, and after the event of the plague. And you find a lot of interconnectedness with the people and how there is just a strive to connect. And it's a wonderful testament to the human will, to the need to be around others and to find something to connect to. It was a very hopeful story, even though a ton of people died in it. So many people, oh my gosh. This one was just a very good feel-good story for me. Which you can't really say about most post-apocalyptic books, but I most definitely recommend it. Next one, you heard me rant and rave about it in October, and that is another historical fiction, The Terror by Dan Simmons. I freaking loved this book. So this one follows the group of explorers during the 1845 Franklin expedition, where they are trying to find a passageway through the North Pole and get frozen in the ice for like 3 years. And that's where like the true story aspect of it ends, and then it goes into giant ice monster. It's not an ice monster, it's more like a giant polar bear weird monster thing that's picking the men off one by one, and it is their struggle to survive throughout all of this. The characters are very, very complex, very interesting. You get a lot of different point of views. You get to learn a lot about the tribes that lived in the North Pole at the time and how they survived and how these people tried to survive. And in a very terrible and unforgiving world, everything is trying to kill these guys. It's like 60 below zero. You get frostbitten in like a second. If you have any exposed skin, you can't touch metal, otherwise it'll rip your skin off, and everyone's dying from scurvy, which is so horrifying. I'm not gonna bring that up again. I have ranted so much about scurvy to people this year. I'm just saying, eat fresh fruit as often as you can. Oh my gosh. But with this one is another one where you get to follow several different narrators. You get to see several perspectives and several different thoughts on the situation at hand as well as society at the time. It has a wonderful atmosphere to it. It is as cold and bleak can get. It's a very big endeavor, almost 800 pages long, but I most definitely recommend it. The final book on my list of favorites will come as a surprise to you. I have not mentioned it once, mainly because I had finished it like yesterday. And okay, so if you followed my review back in August, I think, or September, possibly September. In September, I think, I read Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyemi. And I ranted and raved about it, but not in a good way. It was a very beautiful book, as in the author had a very lyrical and almost magical way of writing. But the ending to this one was just so bad. I could not get past it. But I decided to give her another chance whenever my book club voted in White is for Witching. and oh my gosh. It was everything I loved from Boy Snowbird while having a wonderful, rich plot and having wonderful, rich characters and an entirely creepy atmosphere. Now this one is a coming-of-age horror novel about a girl with an eating disorder who lives in a bed and breakfast with her father and brother. Her mother had died whenever she was younger. Her eating disorder gets worse there now. She has this thing called pica, where she craves not edible things. Like she eats chalk, she eats plastic, she will eat anything but food. Food like disgusts her. And it's her and her family dealing with that while she's trying to make a life for herself and go to college. In the meantime, the house she lives in is hella haunted. And one of the coolest things about this is it switches perspectives a lot in here. You never get the perspective of the main character. You will get chapters from the perspective of the house, which is something I had never encountered before, and it was such an interesting way of doing things. But things actually got very terrifying. The house is very malicious. It had almost the House of Leaves vibe at times. Though the story is great, it is never once clear. I remember so many times being so confused. It's a very abstractly written book. I'm actually really excited to see what my other book club members think about it because we just finished it. The whole book kind of mirrors the way her mind works whenever it comes to being very disjointed, very unwell, and just very confused. I think it was a very excellent character study. You don't really know if the things that are happening with the house are actually happening, so it's left very ambiguously. And it ends very ambiguously, which I really love. That it's a very good mood book, and it's one that'll leave you both uncomfortable and leaves you kind of with a sense of dread. It's very Gotham. It's not for everybody, I do admit that. I gave it 5 stars because it hit all the right notes for me. I definitely want to read more of Helen Oyemi's books. With that, those were my best books for 2018. Hope you guys have a good week. I'm gonna scoot. Awkward outro.